Hi, everybody. We recently led a capital raise for critical battery metal company Impact Minerals. Well, the share price has been doing very well. And to find out more about what's to come, stick around for the rest of this interview. Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another edition of 18 Minutes with 180 Markets. Well, friends, right now, as we are filming, there is some softness in the battery metal mineral space. That's right, and it's probably because expectations are running a little hot. But here at 180 Markets, that can represent a fantastic entry opportunity. And not only that, we are always, as you know, looking for those commodities that have tremendously positive supply demand economics. And certainly one of those metals is HPA, high purity alumina. That's right. It's one of those critical inputs into the future with a tremendously positive structural supply demand story. And now, to even get more specific, we are joined again by our longtime friend, Mike Jones of Impact Minerals, because Impact has one of the most exciting HPA investments or projects, I should say, in Australia. And with that, Mike, welcome back.
Great. Thanks, Greg. And always good to be on 180.
Right. Hey, Mike, I'm going to read a quote here about a recent announcement that you made, which is, this is the most exciting discovery acquisition over your career. This is a watershed day. Can you just talk to us a little bit about the Lake Hope project?
Sure. Yeah, well, that was obviously on the day that we announced the joint venture on the Lake Hope project, which is here in Western Australia. And yeah, you're right. It's in the high purity alumina space, which is perhaps a bit of a niche market. But as you know, I've been around for some time, and we've looked at lots of projects over the years. And we're in the exploration game, trying to find the world-class ore body. And really, when I came across the project, looked at the geology, where it sits, what the potential economics were, it was a case of, wow, this is an exceptional deposit. And it was really a no-brainer in a sense that we had to get involved. And in fact, when I got the information memorandum on the project, it was a bit of a, oh no moment. We're going to have to do this project to give our shareholders, a really good chance of propelling our market cap significantly higher than where it has been for the last few years. So yeah, it was an exciting day when we announced that, and we're still incredibly excited about it, and getting more so the more work we do on it.
That's great. Hey, Mike, can you just for a second on HPA and specifically Australia, which has low sovereign risk, just talk to us about the state of the HPA market and also how Australia fits into this commodity?
Sure. The high purity alumina, as we mentioned, is a bit of a niche market. It's used in two main industries. We can get into details, but in the LED industry, light emitting diodes, both in light globes and increasingly in screens. But the really big use currently is in the lithium-ion battery space, where it's used as a separator between the anode and the cathode, because high purity alumina has is significantly thermally and chemically inert. And if you recall, the Samsung phones were exploding a few years ago. Well, that's basically because the separator wasn't doing its job, and so that's its other main use. And of course, with the increasing forecast for lithium-ion batteries over the next decade, then we're seeing a significant potential demand increase for the HPA in that space. And back in the LED space, there's a global push to replace all the incandescent light bulbs with LEDs, and of course all new buildings, etc., are generally moving towards that as well. And and also in the screens, Samsung are basically switching to LED screens, all of which use HPA. So yeah, we're on the up on the demand curve.
That's right. And now speaking, specifically about the Lake Hope project, can you just tell us a little bit about, and maybe at a high level, and then maybe into a little bit more detail, why it is such an exciting project? And as you said, it was a must do the second you saw it.
Yeah, sure. So look, you went in the previous question, did ask about where Australia sort of fits into this.
Yes.
But so what I'll say is that the incumbent producers of HPA, they generally produce it from aluminium metal, which is produced from bauxite. And so there's a little bit of market education here in the sense we're not mining aluminium. So aluminium is mined out of clays like bauxite, etc. It's converted into aluminium metal, and then people like Sumitomo, who are one of the bigger producers, they convert that metal then into aluminium oxide. Now that's actually quite an energy intensive. It's quite a dirty process, of course. A lot of red mud produced in the whole aluminium process. And so over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a push, mainly driven by Australian junior companies, to produce a hydrometallurgical approach to producing HPA. And the leaders are Alpha HPA, who are using a chemical feedstock. And then there are a number of us providing traditional mining ores, so FYI, resources with their kaolin projects, and there's a number of kaolin projects out there, and then there's ourselves with our unique Lake Hope project. So we're estimating that the new hydrometallurgical players, the operating costs will be significantly lower, sort of 30, 40, maybe even 50% lower than the incumbent producers. And so there is potentially tremendous demand for HPA produced by these new processes. And we're certainly seeing that, I think, reflected in the Alpha HPA share price, which has obviously gone very well, and we hope to emulate.
Right. And then, with Lake Hope itself, maybe again, just tell us a little bit about the project.
So Lake Hope is located about 500 kilometers due east of Perth. And it occurs in 2 very small salt lakes, or playas, Playa. That's the geological name for them. And Western Australia is littered with lakes like this, especially in the southern part. And they're amazing places. We've done quite a bit of work over the years looking for different commodities, because they can host a wide range of materials, from potash to uranium and gypsum, etc. And so this particular set of lakes has its own unique climate, and it has a particular special set of aluminium-rich metals and minerals and clays in it, which are very unique, I think almost on a global scale, for a couple of reasons. The principal one of which is that it's extremely fine-grained. And so you can imagine one of these sort of salt lakes, and basically the top 2 meters of this lake contains about 25 to 30% aluminium oxide in the minerals. It's naturally very fine grained, which leads to a whole host of benefits for future mining, which we can discuss. There's fantastic infrastructure. Amazingly enough, there's a graded road that goes within 25 kilometers, and there's a major fire break that runs right up to the edge of the lake. So, wow. So we don't even need to do any clearing to get the trucks in once we start mining. So look, unique deposit, unique climate area, and it's in a tier 1 jurisdiction of WA, and we think, as a result of that, we should be able to move towards production relatively quickly.
Right. And, you mentioned that the grades are very fine and it's shallow. And how does that translate? And I know it's very early days here, but onto a cost curve.
Yeah. So look, in terms of mining, and look, we'll have the scoping study out next month, probably late August, and certainly by early September, we should have the scoping study out.
Okay.
And look, what we can say is that the mining and transport costs will be less than 5% of the operating costs. I mean, it's ridiculous, really. So just going back, so it's basically in the top 2 meters of the lake, and which means that because it's cheap, it doesn't need crushing, doesn't need grinding, doesn't need any processing on site. We won't need any water. We don't need any electricity. We can do it all by renewables, and basically campaign mine. So the cost of production at the mine site is going to be very, very cheap. And that gives us a huge amount of flexibility, because basically the plan is to take the material and ship it off-site to an industrial yard, which again we should be able to permit relatively quickly and easily, leaving us with a very small hole in the ground, limited rehab, and no long-term environmental liabilities. So it's unique in that respect.
Yeah, and Mike, and I think everyone should very much be aware of this point. This is a critical point, because there's so many projects out there. You see a big resource number, some massive potential, but the reality is those projects are never truly going to come to fruition because they're just too hard and too challenging to build. Isn't that correct?
That's right. And look, one of the things about being in critical minerals, and obviously HPA is now on the Australian list of critical minerals, is that they are a bulk commodity. I mean, there's no shortage of material. So, I mean, the resource that we put out just recently, and I mean, there's basically nearly 900,000 tons of contained alumina, and an average production rate of 10,000 tons a year, then we're looking at 90-year mine life. So there's bulk commodities, everywhere. And the same with a lot of the kaolin projects. There's plenty of material. So a lot of the critical minerals are graphite, HPA, vanadium, etc. There's no shortage of them, and lithium, including lithium. And we're seeing some of the effects of that now, with the lithium price. So there's no shortage. So you've got to have a number of things going for you in this space. And it's probably worth talking about those. I did a LinkedIn post on it for those who are interested, but you've either got to have the biggest, it's got to be the highest grade, you've got to be first to market. And so Pilbara Minerals is a good example. Pilbara Minerals first to market with lithium, and they've been crushing it, okay? And they can survive through the price cycle, or you're the cheapest, the lowest cost producer. And the biggest thing about the HPA at Lake Hope is I truly believe it's going to be one of, if not possibly the lowest cost producer of HPA globally. And that gives us an immense amount of pricing power once we get to market. And that was the single thing that brought me to it. And the biggest driver of that in the short term is the mining cost, which, as I said, probably going to be less than 5% of the operating costs. So that's going to be a huge commercial advantage for us.
Yeah, that does sound incredible. And not only that, you're also in Australia, where a lot of times you'll see low cost projects that are maybe offshore, but here you have that rule of law, which again is another de-risking factor. And to that point, you've recently just had another de-risking factor using real rule of law with Heritage. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Look, we completed the first ever heritage survey over the area just recently with the Ngadju people. We've had a number of discussions with them. They're great people. They're lovely to work with. Unfortunately, for family reasons, I wasn't actually on the survey, but my team were there, and it all went very well. And basically, we've got clearance for ground disturbance on the lake. So there are no significant, heritage issues, even for mining in the future. Obviously, any mining is subject to us coming to a commercial arrangement with the Ngadju people for the mining of the lake. But they understand the geology now. They've been out there, and there are no cultural or ethnographic issues on site. So that's a massive clearance for us. And because even though I was reasonably confident there was, that we should be okay, you never know until the survey's been done. And obviously very cognizant of working with the Ngadju and their traditional beliefs. So yeah, that's a huge step for us.
Right. And again, it demonstrates in Australia here, we have a fantastic rule of law, and it's so important to follow this law. And again, it de-risks these projects as an investor.
That's correct. And look, I will say that there's a lot of talk at the moment about the new Aboriginal cultural heritage laws. I mean, basically, not much has changed for us in the mining industry under the new laws. It's perhaps a bit more bureaucracy to go through. People seem to think that there's something different, but in fact, so we're basically cleared underneath the new law as well. So it's that's a big tick for the project going forward.
Right. Hey, Mike, at the project at Lake Hope, what are the works that have been done so far? I was reading is this correct? There are 99 holes that have been dug by a handheld digger?
Yeah, that's right. I don't know whether you've seen the photographs, but basically we've done all the drilling. We can use this now. Now we put out the resource. I mean, there's 900,000 tons of alumina there. The average price, be conservative, call it $20,000 per ton. There's billions of dollars worth of value in the top 2 meters of that lake. We drilled it out, did all the assays, for basically less than $100,000. Wow. So that is actually the best return on a drill program you're ever going to get anywhere in the world. So we were pretty pleased with that outcome. So because, as I say, it's just 2 meters in the lake. It's like plasticine. You just bang a tube into the lake and pull it and get the material out. So that's been the majority of the work we've done. There's been quite a bit of bench scale test work for the metallurgical recoveries, and that was all very positive. So now, as you'll see, we announced earlier, not long after we'd taken up the project, we're well into the feasibility study now, the pre-feasibility study, which is predominantly all about the test work on the for the metallurgical processing, and that's where the focus is going to be now, sort of over the next 6 to 12 months.
Right. So now we've covered off. It's a large-scale project based in Australia. Great infrastructure nearby. Lower cost quartile is looking pretty solid there. Mike, it all is stacking up. From a timing point of view, what should our investors be looking for over, let's call it, the next 6 to 12 months?
Yep. So we've got, we've just announced the Heritage Survey. Said that was a big tick for us. Sometime in the next quarter, the September quarter, we will put out the scoping study, and then people will see then the numbers that that we have been looking at, and we've had a feeling for a little while. And again, we'll sort of demonstrate where we sit in the cost on the cost curve, and definitely in the lowest cost quartile, possibly the lowest.
Okay.
And then we will lodge the mining lease, as we previously announced. So sometime in the next quarter, both of those two things. So once you've ticked off the mining lease application, the scoping study, and the Heritage Survey, we're basically in the clear then to really push forward to move this thing towards production over the next few years. But the majority of the work that's going on in the background, as I mentioned, is the MET testing. And then once we've got enough product material there, then we can start the qualification period with the potential clients. And that's really where a lot of the focus is starting to work for us, that we're putting in right now, identifying the key users of the product, and also the precursors. There's a lot of other minerals that you can produce as part of this process, which also have a huge in the battery infrastructure. So it's not just HPA. There are other things that we can produce, and those are also very valuable markets. So once we've got enough material in our hands to hand over to people for testing, and we should have that by the end of this year easily, then we'll start that qualification period, and that'll be a very exciting time for us all.
Yes, exactly. And I'm sure that there'll be plenty of people that will be lining up for that qualification period. So I have no doubt about that, given the supply-demand curve. Hey, Mike, but you're not just a one-trick pony at Impact. Can you just tell us a little bit more about your other projects and how they are progressing?
So one of the other great advantages of Lake Hope is that because we've basically defined the resource and we're in the PFS, the cost of the PFS work is all about the metallurgical test work. And that's actually a relatively cheap thing to do. We're talking a few $1 million, not tens of millions like many other feasibility studies are. And so that's actually giving us the flexibility to keep exploring on some of our other projects, in particular our Aachen project here again in Western Australia. And for those that follow the story, we've got some spectacular anomalies recently. We just announced in soils for rare earths. And the particular part of Western Australia where we are, which is southwest of Perth, is now emerging as another rare earth province. So we've got a big 10-kilometre long zone of rare earths there that we need to follow up. We've previously announced significant nickel copper PGE in the same area, and we've also got lithium pegmatite potential in there as well. So there's got a lot of news flow to come for that. And as I like to say, look, MET test work, whilst it's exciting to the MET people, it's not that exciting to the market. So we are still very committed to Aachen and getting towards a drill program there towards the end of this year and into next year, once the cropping season is finished. So it's in the wheat belt. We've got to wait for the wheat to be cut, and then we can get in there. So look, and that's a fantastic project. We've had a lot of interest in it. We're almost completely surrounded by Anglo American.
Right.
They pegged about 10,000 square kilometers about the day after we announced that we'd taken on Aachen. And they've been very active. They've set up a project. They've set up a regional exploration office here in Perth. So there's obviously getting some excitement there. Difficult to know what Anglo are doing, of course, but they're certainly very active immediately adjacent to this. So that's exciting. And I will mention, look, we were one of the first 7 recipients of the first ever BHP Explore program. Now that officially came to the end of June the 30th. We're still in data collection mode. There's a lot of nuances to the Explore program that most people aren't aware of, but it's basically a grant to accelerate your project, and at a At time, once we put everything together, BHP still remain very interested in our project. And then we'll go to them with our data once we put it all together and say, hey, are you interested in investing further at that stage? And we'll go from there. But what I can say, we've done some amazing work at Broken Hill. There'll be more information on that. Some world first surveys. First time there's ever been some deep surveys and particular types of geophysics done at Broken Hill. And we're seeing some fantastic insights. So that's a big project to look forward to over the next couple of years. Yeah.
Right. Well, you never know, Michael. And when you're surrounded by these big people like the BHP Anglos, and I believe you came from a big place, WMC, you never know what can happen.
Exactly right. You've got to be in it to win it, Greg.
Exactly. Mike, we try to keep the interviews, as you know, fairly tight.
Yeah.
In a closing statement here, if there was one point you'd really want every investor to know about Impact, what would that be?
Look, we're aiming to be one of, if not the lowest cost producers of a product called HPA, which is going to be in increasing demand over the next 10 years. It's an incredibly exciting space to be in, and we hope to follow in the footsteps of some very successful company. I'll mention them again. It's worth mentioning them because people can go and have a look. Alpha HPA, their market cap hit $1 billion just recently, give or take.
We'll take that.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it shows that if you can get it right in this space, and there's a lot of things that we've spoken about today which indicate that this project is going to get it right. And then there's nothing stopping us increasing our market cap significantly from where we are now. And that's right. The journey we're on.
Thanks, Mike, as always. And we will absolutely, as you know, be in touch.
That's great. Thanks, Greg.